Night in the Woods is an emotional indie title that, despite its tragic legacy, is a must-play experience for anyone who has ever struggled with mental health or the isolating feeling of growing up and outgrowing their hometown. So basically, it's a game for everyone. Now I know you've come to expect concise and timely reviews here at I Dream of Indie Games, but today we are going to delve into something a little bit different. This is not a review of Night in the Woods. In today's video, we will be discussing the development and lasting impact of this legendary indie gaming experience, with a bit of backstory on the influences, themes, and my general thoughts and feelings on the game itself. With all its success in the past 7 years, it's almost hard to fathom that Night in the Woods began as a humble Kickstarter project from developers Infinite Fall in 2013 with a goal of $50,000 USD. To the surprise of the small development team of Scott Benson, Alec Haloka, and Bethany Hockenberry, that goal was shattered in just 26 hours, raking in over $200,000 from backers. This extra funding allowed the team to hire additional help, including Adam Saltzman, along with animator Charles Huetner. The name Night in the Woods was inspired by the first track on the World Inferno Friendship Society's album, The True Story of the Bridgewater Astral League. And that's not the only artistic inspiration that led to the creation of this beloved indie. Some of the primary influences behind the game's artistic style include cartoonist Chris Ware, known for the Acme Novelty Library series, as well as graphic novels like The Smartest Kid on Earth. There are also hints of Mary Blair of Walt Disney Company fame, who created concept art for Alice in Wonderland and Cinderella. But perhaps one of the most notable influences would be Richard Scarry, creator of over 300 children's books. I'm confident you've seen a few of his works at some point in your life, and you can definitely feel his influence just by taking one glance at Night in the Woods. Prior to releasing the finished product, Benson and team released a few smaller titles set in the Night in the Woods universe, 2013's The Longest Night and Lost Constellation in 2014. Both games were supplemental, experimental side stories for world building and brewing anticipation for what would eventually become Night in the Woods. After a brief delay from their intended January 2017 release date, Night in the Woods officially launched on February 21st, 2017, promoted by Finji, a company relaunched by Saltzman, which wasn't exactly known for publishing at all. An extended version, the Weird Autumn Edition, was released a bit later and included both of the previously mentioned titles and some additional content for those who wanted to make things really weird. Since you're watching this video, you probably already know this, but Night in the Woods was exceptionally well received. It won Best Adventure Game from IGN in 2017 and still sits at an 88% on Metacritic to this day. Critics appreciated the charming writing, offbeat humor, amazing soundtrack, and impressive 2D visuals, as well as the difficult topics the game tackles. While I wasn't able to find any concrete numbers regarding sales, soft data available does point to it selling over 500,000 copies, which is pretty darn impressive for a Kickstarter project from a little indie team. So just what was it about Night in the Woods that made it so universally relatable? Do you have a singular place in the world that feels like home, even when you don't want it to? A childhood town, perhaps the city where you had your first apartment or an old college haunt. A place you promised yourself you'd make it out of, but somehow the world keeps rubber banding you back there like Blink's boomerang. I certainly have a place like this, and I'm guessing you do too. For Night in the Woods protagonist May, Possum Springs is that place. May, a college dropout, returns home under not the most pleasant of circumstances and finds herself puttering around her old stomping grounds, reuniting with old friends and facing the town's terrible secrets head-on. Night in the Woods is a hard-hitting, emotionally draining, narrative-heavy experience that puts players through the ringer, but not in the gameplay department. The game is told through interactions between May and her group of friends, as well as May's internal dialogue as she processes the current state of her life and how she ended up back in Possum Springs. These interactions are sprinkled with dialogue choices for the player to make that help reveal additional story elements. The more you interact with people, the more you'll learn about May, Possum Springs, and the darkness lurking just below the surface. There are also some pretty wild minigames interspersed between these conversations, one of which will take you back to everyone's favorite guitar-based rhythm game. Writer Scott Benson once described the gameplay as, quote, explore, converse, see, and touch, and that feels like a great representation of what you actually end up doing in Night in the Woods. I don't need to convince you that Night in the Woods is a fun and powerful experience, but even just watching clips of this game made me want to play through it again. More importantly, Night in the Woods dared to tackle once taboo topics that games of the past would have avoided. In a general sense, the game is based on writers Bethany Hockenberry and Scott Benson's experiences growing up in small towns. While mental health is a central theme of Night in the Woods, it's certainly not the only subject on the table. The game tackles existentialism, late-stage capitalism, faith, and the desire to pave one's own path in the world. To this day, Night in the Woods is open to countless fan theories trying to connect the dots like constellations in the sky. One such theory pertains to the appearance of the denizens of Possum Springs. Despite their wild appearances, many have speculated that these inhabitants aren't animals at all, only portrayed as such to relate to their experiences and pull at the heartstrings of a wider player base. And of course, a town is only as interesting as its inhabitants, and Possum Springs is no exception. Take Greg Lee, for example, May's best friend who spends his time working at the Snack Falcon. Greg is a punk full of energy who talks a mile a minute but is perpetually terrified of ruining his relationship with Angus, another local. Without outwardly stating it, Night in the Woods certainly flirts with bestowing a bipolar diagnosis on Greg. And then there's B, May's estranged childhood pal. They fell out of contact after May began hanging out with other people and slowly drifted apart despite never having a falling out. I know there are a great number of people in my life that, for whatever reason, I've stopped maintaining contact with, but would absolutely love to hear from again. It's nothing personal, sometimes life just happens. Another lesson that Night in the Woods expertly teaches us. Perhaps one of the most relatable themes of Night in the Woods is its portrayal of identity and discovering a sense of self. When May returns to Possum Springs, she's not just physically returning to her hometown, she's also rediscovering what it means to be May and finding her place in the world by confronting her past. May begins to recognize her faults through conversations with Greg, Bee, and Angus, which forces her to confront her failures. The game expertly captures emotions that we've all felt, feeling lost or not understanding our place in the world. Night in the Woods is a journey of self-discovery that serves to remind us of the many challenges we'll face in life. Its larger focus is on mental health, as our lead character battles with depression and dissociation. From self-confrontation to psychological battles, we live through May's struggles as a player. And yet, as expertly as the game tackles personal emotions, Night in the Woods also offers commentary on societal issues. The town of Possum Springs is in great decline. Stores are closing, residents are leaving, and yet there's a small dedicated group unwilling to leave. It almost reminds me of Centralia, a mining town in northeastern Pennsylvania where many residents were forced out due to a coal mine fire beneath the town. This was also the inspiration for the Silent Hill series. A small group of residents refused to leave, and even today, it's said that 5 people still live there. This type of resilience reminds me of Possum Springs, a town that, despite its struggles, many wish not to leave. Unfortunately, the lines between fiction and reality began to blur a few years after Night in the Woods debuted. In August of 2019, allegations of both physical and emotional abuse were levied at developer Alec Haloka. Zoe Quinn, known for Depression Quest and work on other infamous indies like Fez, spoke out against Alec, whom they had briefly lived with. Almost immediately, Benson and the Infinite Falls team severed ties with Alec, supported by publisher Finji. Quinn was no stranger to controversies, but that's an entirely different story for a different day. Alec had been struggling with mental disorders for years, similar to those portrayed in Night in the Woods. 4 days after the allegations were made public, Alec took his own life. From Benson's recounts, working with Haloka had been tumultuous, with dramatic high highs and low lows. With Alec's passing, it's difficult to discern the truth around these events, but it remains a controversial topic to this day. Whether the circumstances surrounding Haloka's death left a permanent stain on the Night in the Woods legacy is up for debate, but today it still stands as a landmark indie gaming release. The way it blends storytelling, mental health, and societal issues into one strange world is fascinating even all of these years later. Despite its muddled history, Night in the Woods is a beloved indie title that has received countless recognition, fan art, fan fiction, and general love from the gaming community. This is partially due to the wonderful writing, the charming artwork, and the entertainment value packed into this relatively short but sweet experience. But I think the real reason this game has stuck with folks for so long is the relatable experiences of its cast of characters. A lot of us can see ourselves in May, Bee, Greg, and Angus. Even if we're not currently going through the growing pains of coming into ourselves, we've all gone through it. In the end, Night in the Woods is a powerful exploration of the harsh realities of life, and its message remains just as vital today as it was at launch. From my perspective, Night in the Woods is not just an important release, it's an essential one. Now we'd love to hear from you. Have you played Night in the Woods? Did it have a lasting impact on you? Share your thoughts down below, and as always, thank you so much for supporting independent content here at I Dream of Indie Games. If you enjoy mini docs such as these, let us know too, and we'll continue to make them. Voice to the voiceless.